Welcome back, baseball fans, to the beginning of the 1981-84 Fall League. And this is the origin, the beginning point. When one season ends, a new season begins, the off-season look. We've finished the 1980-83 Fall League. We've done the World Series. The Ohio players beat Philadelphia in that. We did an elimination video for each of the teams. We reconciled the 1980 card sets, which is returning 8 of the 1980 cards to their original card set box, leaving all teams with 12 players. They would be in the years 81, 82, and 83. So remember, 80, we had 8, that's gone. And then this is the 12 that are left. 6 in 81, 4 in 82, and 2 in 83. So the 81-84 season, we draft 2 players from each year. The 6 turns to 8, the 4 goes to 6, the 2 goes to 4, and we introduce, you could call them rookies. And that 8642, we should call it the 8642 League, you know? But I've been calling it the Carrier League just for simplicity's sake. We've determined a draft order, and tonight we're going to look at some trades that have already happened. We'll get to them soon. Let me just go through the draft order. While you do this, you got the final 4. World champs, Ohio, 32. Philadelphia, 31. Runners-up are Houston and Oakland. And then the next round, runners-up by winning percentage here. And the last 4 playoff teams, losers in the wild card round here. All done by winning percentage. And one rule I have is that a league can't have 3 consecutive teams. They're going to have 2 consecutive, but not 3 consecutive. So I'll alter that to make sure that doesn't happen. It's something I just don't want to see. Happens in the NFL in their drafts, but I don't want to do it in mine. So St. Louis from the National League played a .296 winning percentage schedule. It's a really bad year for them. I don't know why. When you consider that, 82 they win the World Series, and that being in the middle of this, but they got to make some moves, and they have thus far. But anyway, they finished 8-19. This is also good news. The CA 969 right here. They're the winner of the Commissioner Award. So this is a fantastic boon for this team. Normally, the Commissioner Award is mostly a team that plays a lot of games and gets close to 500 and just misses the playoffs. They're in that purgatory between high draft pick and playoff team. But the Cardinals have it. What's it mean? They get a compensation pick in the draft. That pick is the 33rd pick in the draft. So the Cardinals will be picking 1st, 33rd, and 34th, which is the first pick in the second round. They'll have 3 of the first 34 picks in the draft. That should help the Cardinals get closer to the 82 World Series. The first 8 picks are from the 8 fourth-place teams, and we'll be looking at some of the moves they've already made in the offseason tonight before we do a wrap. We have National League, American League, National, American League, American League, National, American League is how the winning percentage thing worked. Then after that, the next 12 teams are all the teams that didn't make the playoffs or weren't in last place, second and third place teams mostly. And so you have National, American, National, American, National, American, American, National, American, National, American. And then you have the Cubs and the Angels, the Brewers, the Giants, Yankees, and Cleveland, back-to-back American League, because the next 2 National League teams were much better. Portland, Cincinnati, higher winning percentages here versus there. Runners-up in the divisional round. And the final 4. And that's how it's done. Okay, now that we know that's how it's done, we have rosters for the end of the year. 32 teams have put the 1980 cards away, and we desire the entire league to keep 128 of their players, put 64 on waivers, and retire 64. By doing separate analysis of all teams, this number here, if you look at it, this 5 means they want to keep 5. They want to put 2 on waivers. They want to retire 1. $10,000 to keep a player. $100 to put them on waivers $1 to retire him. But the desired result is 40202. There are not a lot of teams that start that way. Texas does, but they don't have to. They can still make moves. Texas has 4 keepers, 2 waivers, and 2 retires. Well, let's quickly examine, could they go into a draft like this? They want to keep Buddy Bell? Sure. They want to keep Mickey Rivers? They want to keep John Matlack? They want to keep Doc Metic? Sure, that all sounds good. Rusty Staub's on waivers. He's getting up there. He only, I think, 81 or 82 is his last year. That makes sense. Frank Tavares, yeah, he has a really bad 81. And then Lentin was a 1-year player, and Dave Roberts at the end of his career, too. So that kind of makes sense. Comments section here, I put in a trade if I think a team should trade a player. In this case, I highlighted Rusty Staub. Don't know if it's going to happen or not, but I highlighted it. And then you see that comment section is really lit up on some teams. Also, the numbers are really cockeyed on a lot of teams. See, Kansas City wants to keep 6 players. They can't keep 6 players. Or you have Oakland wants to keep 7 players. They want to keep Armas and Gross and Henderson and Gene Tennis and Rick Langford, Tom Underwood, and Jeff Jones. Not going to happen. So, the first thing I did was I put together a list of all the guys who are on the trade block. And that's about 50 guys. So that's nice to have that many guys on the trade block. We also have a computation of how off the entire league is from getting closer to each team at 40202. The keeper list, plus 17. That means a lot of guys desire to be kept, can't be, so the team wants to trade them, and they're like, well, nobody wants to trade for our talented player. And it's like, well, yeah, because you're going to have to put them on waivers so we can get them for free. Right? I mean, why make a trade when you just wait for that guy to be out in the street and sign him that way? Only 2 guys on the waiver list over, meaning that the worst of 2, the worst 2 guys on the waiver list will probably go directly into retirement, which is short 19 players. What it means is 17 keepers will go into waivers. Those 2 plus 17 more waivers will be forced into retirement, meaning the retirement list isn't simply guys who don't play Strat-O-Matic anymore. It means guys who are really bad at Strat-O-Matic. But that's all right, because retired players get pulled out of retirement year after year after year. So tonight we're going to look at the first moves made, and we'll go into this sheet for draft order. So for draft order, what we do is we start with the Cardinals opening up discussions. They make as many moves as they want, and if they want to pause, they can pause, and then we go to the next team. And then that doesn't mean they can't make any more trades. It just means they want to pause and think about things for a bit. So the Cardinals go first, then Seattle, the Dodgers, Las Vegas, Boston, Minnesota, the Mets, and Tigers. We'll look at the first slew of moves made tonight. Also, every team gets $5 or 5 tokens, 5 units. And these are individual pieces that can be added or subtracted to trades to balance them out. So you'll see pluses and minus 1s, occasionally a minus or plus 2. And I've identified 50 players on a separate sheet. It makes it easier for me to get our aerial view, so to speak, and looking down and see, oh, these are the desirable guys. Let's kind of prioritize the desired players to whoever wants them. And a big chunk has moved. I also want to go here to the moves made. I want to go back last year. So last year was a very dull offseason. Hardly anything happened as far as teams making trades. Happens every once in a while. Seattle acquired Dave Kingman from the Cubs. That didn't really help very much in that one. Landreau went from the Twins to the Blue Jays. Rick Wise went to the Giants. Not many. This was the only significant move. It was California and Houston sending Nolan Ryan for Ken Forsch. So this is a case of something that occurred IRL in MLB. So it's not exactly the identical trade. There's other pieces involved. But principally, in that offseason, moving Nolan Ryan from California to Houston for Ken Forsch was top priority over everything else on this list. And beyond that, there's still more incidentals. And then when you get to the bottom, when you see teams here, if it's yellow, that's the color for waivers, and red's the color for retirement. This is simply bookkeeping. Teams are trading waived guys for retired guys just so their accounting is correct. But neither team has any horse in... They don't have a dog in the fight. They don't have a horse in the race. They're just trying to move players around to make the league balance. So there's a big chunk of nothing happened. Dave Roberts continued. And that is that. And I think these are the moves from the previous years. Okay. Which brings up this year. And folks, I am telling you, after a dull offseason of nothing, suddenly something happened to Major League Baseball in 80, 81, 82, where teams were trading willy-nilly all over the place. IRL in MLB. And I've done my best to put that together when I could. I mean, you just saw basically an offseason that was basically Nolan Ryan and Dave Kingman. Well, things have drastically changed, and it is an accountant's nightmare. We are churning through number 2 Dixon Ticonderoga pencils and sharpeners and erasers, getting this math correct. And the first team on the clock is the St. Louis Cardinals. And they had 2 off seasons where they were starting to assemble their 82 World Series team. And let's begin. So in the first trade, they're dealing directly with the Milwaukee Brewers, sending principally Ted Simmons for Sixto Lezcano, with active players Orlando Sanchez and Rufino Linares adding to the balance. The Cardinals get a token from the Brewers because Ted Simmons, theoretically, is an all-star catcher, and Lezcano just hit 229. Little do we know that Ted Simmons is not going to come close to his stats in Milwaukee that he had in St. Louis, but that's Milwaukee's problem. Anyway, so St. Louis gets Lezcano in the deal. Then in a separate deal, oh boy, I'm telling you, this is like home, yeah. All right, Cardinals and Padres. The principles between Milwaukee, St. Louis, and San Diego, if you go back to baseball history, those teams made three team trades, and they were blockbusters, and I kind of broke it down into smaller bits and pieces. But now the Cardinals are sending Gary Templeton, Steve Trout, who they acquired as a free agent last year, and active player Bruce Sutter. Remember, Bruce Sutter, they get him, and he helps them win the 82 World Series. Not anymore. To the Padres for the rights to Ozzie Smith, the rights to Raleigh Fingers, and John Walkenfuss, who's a really power-hitting catcher versus lefties. And the Cardinals, the token they got in Ted Simmons, they gave it to the Padres because they're ending up with Ozzie Smith. Ozzie Smith principally better than Gary Templeton, and of course Ozzie Smith makes the Cardinals who they were. So that's why the Cardinals got a token and spent it. So they broke even with tokens, but they were real happy with this haul. And let me kind of go through something with you folks. If you're wondering about Sutter and Raleigh Fingers and Milwaukee and all this, let me kind of take you down to Baseball Reference for a moment. I want to bring up this guy that the Brewers added in the draft last year. So Peter Ladd was drafted last year to the Brewers because it was 83. And Peter Ladd had a brilliant 83, the year after they lost the World Series. Peter Ladd comes on board with a 2.55 ERA and 25 saves and a 0.93 whip. Well, folks, that means that Milwaukee's not really in the Raleigh Fingers business. They don't need him. They don't need to make that deal. You get him for free. You get him from your minor league system, so you don't have to go out somewhere and get a closer. So the Cardinals were like, okay, Riley Fingers is out there. Well, we have Bruce Sutter. He's a Hall of Famer. Riley Fingers is a Hall of Famer. Let's make this deal happen. So Riley Fingers will be closing games for the St. Louis Cardinals with a chance to face the Brewers in the World Series, theoretically, and close out versus the Brewers with Riley Fingers. And if you're wondering about Bruce Sutter, don't shed no tears, folks. Bruce Sutter's best year in the timeline isn't 1982 with St. Louis, it's 1984 with St. Louis. So that card will eventually end up in San Diego in 1984. Speaking of 1984, do you know what happens? The San Diego Padres go to the World Series against the Tigers. And Bruce Sutter will be closing their games, not another Hall of Famer. And can you guess who that Hall of Famer is? Off the top of your head? No, it's not Eckersley. You should know this one, though, folks, if you've been following along. Yep, Goose Gossage. And see that Yankee hat? See that Padre hat? He's going to stay in New York now. So we are really dialing in these Hall of Fame closers. So because Peter Ladd, again, it's a short sample, 83, it's a 3-year deal, because he's very good as a closer, the Brewers don't have to go after a Hall of Famer, which means Fingers in St. Louis, Sutter in San Diego, and Gossage gets to stay in New York. With that, with those blockbuster moves to this offseason, this is how it starts, and it only gets crazier from here. The Cardinals are going to pause and think about things a bit. So we're going to move to Seattle. And oh boy, folks, something about the White Sox and the Mariners. They seem to like to move guys back and forth here. So the White Sox made a surprising run to get close to the playoffs, just missed out. And now they want to get the pieces for their 1983 team. Tom Paciork's an active player for Seattle. Floyd Bannister's a free agent for them. And we've got wavered players Romo and Mendoza. Seattle's shipping all that to the White Sox for a 1981 active player, Essien. By the way, Paciork's hitting .326, Essien's hitting .308. But Paciork has a better and longer shelf life as a more talented player. The White Sox are also unloading the rights to Ross Baumgarten, Andy Hassler, and Jim Morrison to Seattle. And they're giving Seattle a draft token. And why is that? Because Tom Paciork and Floyd Bannister are much better than this haul here. So the White Sox will pay. They're spenders now. They want to put this thing together. So they went out and got Paciork and Bannister. Is Seattle done? Seattle's done. All right. Next team. Seattle's done, but they still have 6 guys they want to keep. So they're paused, we should say. The next team is the Dodgers. The Dodgers. Oh, yes. So, after 1980, Don Sutton gets signed by Houston as a free agent. How boring is that? So, I don't have free agency. I just don't let Hall of Famers just go willy-nilly all over baseball. There had to be a trade. So, the Dodgers will get a draft token from Houston for Sutton. They'll get a retired player, which sadly is J.R. Richard. And that's why you get the token. Richard retired because he suffered a stroke. And then active players, this is really what the Dodgers wanted in allowing Houston to get Sutton from them directly. Houston stole Tim Wallach away from the Expos. The Expos are now going to have to ride Larry Parrish. They're going to keep him. They're not going to trade him anymore. And now the Dodgers got their hands on Tim Wallach. That's his 3rd team. The reason why the Dodgers got their hands on Tim Wallach is that he can play 1st and 3rd. And we don't know how long Ron Cey and Steve Garvey are going to be with the Dodgers. And Wallach can play either position. So Garvey could end up going to the Padres. Ron Cey could end up going to the Cubs. So that's kind of a security blanket for the Dodgers, plus a draft token for a guy who wasn't with the Dodgers after 1980. That was a pretty sleek, nice move for the Dodgers. Houston still gets their guy. Next up, oh boy. Okay, so this If you're wondering why the name carousel comes up, I was thinking of the Lazy Susan, the thing in the center of the table with the condiments on it, and you spin it and you pull out the ketchup, and you spin it again, you pull out the mayonnaise, you spin it again, you get the salt and pepper. You know that thing? Well, this is sort of what happens in this. A team puts a player on the Lazy Susan. They spin it to another team. They put a player, etc. It could go on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've had carousels go to 10, 12, whatever. But once it gets back to the beginning, if everybody's happy, if all teams are happy, then the trade is done. If somebody doesn't like what's going on, it's all canceled. So here's the merry-go-round. Vegas sends Willie Randolph to the Yankees, where he should have been all along. The Yankees sent Willie Wilson to Kansas City, where he should have been all along, while also sending Bucky Dent to the Cubs. Kansas City sends Claudell Washington, vacating the outfield for Wilson, to the Cubs. The Cubs send Kenny Singleton they send Ken Singleton to Baltimore, and Baltimore sends Al Bunbury back up to the team that started it, Las Vegas. We have a balancer. Terry Crowley is simply a roster spot because he's retired. So some teams got 2 players, some teams got 1. The Yankees lost Willie Wilson and Bucky Dent, but they ended up with Willie Randolph and a retired player, Crowley. The Cubs lost Singleton and aforementioned Crowley. They ended up with a new shortstop, Bucky Dent, and they ended up with Claudell Washington. So that's how that worked out. And as far as the trade compensation goes, Willie Wilson, the Yankees, gave him back to Kansas City, but they gave a potential batting champion back to Kansas City, so they get a token from the Royals for that. Sadly, the Royals had to pay to get their player back, but he's a batting champion, and the Yankees literally let him go. They gave up on Willie Wilson, you could say. Maybe that's why in this replay of the early 80s is why the Yankees started to fall downhill after 81. All right. The next team up, you have to go back to draft order for a second. We've had St. Louis, Seattle, the Dodgers. Vegas started that carousel. Now we got Boston, and oh boy, I'm telling you, you think this is going? I could be here for an hour, folks. I don't know how long this video is going to go because this is just a crazy, wild off season. And if you go back into baseball history, look it up. Look at all the moves that were made. Boston and the White Sox. Vegas in there again. California Angels, Oakland A's. Oh boy, folks, we got some HOFs in here. We got Carlton Fisk. Boston shipping out. They gave up. They put up the red flag. They said the 70s Red Sox are over. We're going to transition to the Wade Boggs 80 Red Sox. So Carlton Fisk and Freddie Lynn, see you later. Fisk goes to the White Sox. Freddie Lynn goes to the California Angels. They even ship out Dave Stapleton to Oakland. The White Sox want a piece of this. You know they want Fisk. They're going to ship out Oscar Gamble to get Fisk. Gamble ends up in Las Vegas. Also, remember this Enrique Romo up above? That wavered player? He keeps getting bounced around as a wavered player. And a wavered player isn't even going to get drafted by the team. They're just going to go on the waiver list. Vegas gets into the deal. They end up with Oscar Gamble, but they ship John Tudor back to Boston, where he started. Tudor started with the Red Sox. He also pitched for the Pirates and Cardinals. California Angels shipped Mark Clear to the Red Sox. And Tim Blackwell, a waived player, to the Oakland A's. And then here's the Oakland A's, another big lifter with the Red Sox. Gene Tennis, very old by now, he goes to the Angels. Jeff Jones goes to the White Sox. And Tony Armas goes to Boston. Tony Armas has 43 home runs in Fenway Park. So Boston, let's start with them. They lost Fisk, Lynn Stapleton. They ended up with Tudor, Mark Clear, Tony Armas. Who's the other big player in this? Well, White Sox got Fisk and gave up Gamble, so they lost a token because Carlton Fisk is a huge upgrade for the White Sox. So that cost them a token. Oakland gets a token because they shipped off 3 players. You see, Tennis, Jones, and Armas. They end up getting a waivered player, another waivered player, and Dave Stapleton. So that's why they get the token in that. And if you're wondering why some teams are trading for waivered guys, remember the case of Oakland I showed you before? Oakland was in a situation where they unfortunately had too many guys, right? We'll do a before and after. This is before. Oakland had 7 guys they wanted to keep. Presently, after all this traffic, all these moves are made, Oakland's down to 5 now. Stapleton, Gross, Ricky Henderson, Langford, Underwood. That's more reasonable. And now all they have to do is decide between Wayne Gross and Tom Underwood, probably, who they want to keep. But that's pretty cool that a lot of movement it's doing 2 things. It's mirroring a little bit of Major League Baseball, but it's also getting my numbers to where they need to be to start a draft. Everybody keeping 4 players they like, putting 2 guys on waivers, and retiring 2 players. Are we done with Boston? Yeah, we are. Who's next? The Twins. Very minor move here, I believe. Yeah. The Twins, here's an interesting couple lefties. Jerry Koosman has some tread on his tires. Jim Cott is bald. And we can see the, he's got like a blowout on the side. It's not holding wind anymore. They're Minnesota and Detroit are making a deal because an active player is being traded and a waivered guy is. The Twins get some money out of it. They get a token from the Tigers. Moving on from Jerry Koosman. And what's interesting is that Koosman does leave the Twins and actually does some nice stuff with the Phillies in 1984, I believe. So he actually has a very long career. Jim Cott is just very old. I mean, he's started his career in the 1950s, so he's due to get out of the league pretty soon. Next up, oh boy, is this the Mets? New York Mets, trying to get that 84 team together. Patience, Mets fan, it's coming. But in the first stages, there's a nice little move. You got the Blue Jays and the Angels involved. Holy Toledo, this deal. All right, the Mets had the rights to Rance Mullinax, who was like a 259 hitter. Now, unfortunately for them, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, Rance Mullinax kicks butt in 83 and 84. I think he gets 313. And Toronto wants their guy. They want Rance. So the Mets get rid of him and an active player, Doug Bear. Mullinax goes to Toronto. Doug Bear goes to the Angels. Toronto is the team that got Rod Carew from the Twins. The Twins didn't want to send Carew to the Angels, and the Angels were blocked by Ron Jackson at first base. No more. The Angels have cleared the deck. They have room for Rod Carew now. So Toronto sends Rod Carew and Jerry Garvin to the Angels. The Angels send Ron Jackson, who was blocking Carew at first base. By the way, Ron Jackson at 331. Ron Jackson goes to the Mets. So they didn't get the 313 Mullinax, but they get a 331 Ron Jackson. The Mets also get Gene Richards, a speedy outfielder, to replace Lee Mazzilli. Toronto gets a waivered player. So Toronto gets a token because they, they gave away a Hall of Famer, Rod Carew. And let's face it, Rod Carew played 2 years for the Toronto Blue Jays in our league. What's wrong with that? That's cool. That's a pretty cool story. Putting some fannies in the seats in Toronto when they weren't very good otherwise. I wonder if Toronto could have lured any Hall of Famer up there in that timeline. And then the Angels, to get Rod Carew, they lose a token. Let's look at the Angels for a second. Because they've been making a lot of moves, right? Let's look at the Angels. Here's how they started the offseason. 20501. Blech. They wanted to keep Gene Richards and Mark Clear. That's how the offseason started. Let's see where the Angels are now. Freddie Lynn, Rod Carew, Gene Tennis, and Jerry Garvin. Not bad at all. They're probably not going to get Reggie Jackson this offseason. I don't think they got room for him. Lynn will play center. Brian Downing will play left. They still have Dan Ford in right field. So I don't think they're going to make a move for Reggie Jackson yet. But Carew is now playing first base. Fred Lynn in center field. Those are big moves for an Angels team. If you've been following the Fall League, folks, the Angels have been winning year after year after year. Even when statistically they don't look very good, they have gone far into the postseason every last 3 years. Going to do it. Try and do it 4 years now. Oh boy! Next up, after the Mets, the Tigers, and then we'll call it. It's been a long video. So the Tigers. Oh my goodness, the Tigers are thinking very much about their 1984 World Championship. Okay, so you saw earlier they really lacked for left-handed pitching. Before we started, the Tigers were going to keep Steve Kemp and Alan Trammell and nobody else. Looking at the pitching staff, Jim Cott was going on waivers, Sparky Lyle was going on waivers, Pat Underwood was going in retirement. Those are all left-handers. Rob Dressler was being retired. So half their pitching staff was gone. So the Tigers got Jerry Koosman up above. That's one lefty. But what lefty do you think the Tigers are going to go after, folks? Who do you think? Who do you think? Come on, you got to know who they're going to go after. Ding, 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 ding. Willie Hernandez. My goodness, folks. What a crazy offseason for Hall of Fame or closers. Pete's sakes, I got to put Willie in here. There we go. Not Hall of Famer, but an MVP. MVP in 1984. Willie, okay. So Willie, this is the season. 9-3, 192 ERA, 80 games, 68 finished, 32 saves. Cy Young MVP, 1984. And we talked Bruce Sutter as a nice 1984. We know Gossage is good in 84. We know Fingers is good in 81. I think he's still good in 84. So we've seen a lot of closers in our analysis. Here's the trade. Portland had the rights to a Willie Hernandez, and let me show you what Portland had. This guy. Portland had Willie Hernandez, a 25-year-old pitcher who was 1-9 with a 4.40 ERA and a 1.47 WHIP. That's who Portland had. And Portland's an expansion team, so they're always looking for assets. So Detroit's going to send the retired lefty setup guy Underwood for Hernandez. Incidental active guys to balance out. Detroit's sending Don Ossie, in 1981, very good reliever. By the way, Ossie, I believe he becomes a closer for Baltimore and actually goes to the All-Star game. I think I saw Don Ossie closing out the All-Star game in Houston one year. Tom Brennan is a very capable pitcher in 1981. He goes to the Tigers, replacing Dressler. But the compensation beyond this, ding, ding, ding. We talked about a token. Every once in a while, it's 2 tokens. When it's a Hall of Famer or a Hall of Famer in the best year of his career, or if it's a really lopsided trade. And frankly, this is a really lopsided trade. Because everybody in the American League is ticked off that the Tigers are going to get Willie Hernandez and not give up much for him, except for the money. $2. So when we look at the Tigers post, now they also traded Steve Kemp for Johnny Grubb. So Johnny Grubb, Alan Trammell, Jerry Koosman, Willie Hernandez in a balance. You see, Detroit's ready to go right now if they wanted to. They're ready to go. They could continue to make moves, but they're pretty much set at this point. Their math looks correct. But the money, this is Detroit's money. You start with $5. It cost them $1 for Koosman. It cost them $2 for Willie Hernandez. They only have $2 left. What does that mean? It means that if they continue to make moves and with their last $2, once undrafted free agency begins in the draft, they're going to have to wait until everybody else has filled out their roster with guys signed off the street, and then complete their 20-man roster. So they're poor. They shot their wad, and they're very poor right now. Speaking of that, the White Sox, they kind of shot their wad a little bit. They got $3 because they went after Carlton Fisk and Floyd Bannister, Tom Paciorek, but they're happy. The teams that shoot their wad, most of the time they're happy because, frankly, what you find in free agency at the end of the draft to fill up the 20-man roster isn't that big a deal anyway. If you want to spend, spend. And speaking of spending, so far, who's collected money? Well, Portland's up to 7 tokens. So they've got a big fat wallet. And who are they going to spend it on? I don't know. But Portland had a nice record last year. They were 19-11. Maybe Portland seems to want to be the big fish in the small pond, right? Portland is drafting 27th. They were 19-11. So maybe Portland's plan is simply to stay ahead of the Arizona Diamondbacks, Colorado Rockies, and Las Vegas, using that money to shore up any weak holes in their roster. That is it for the first 8 teams here, folks. We're going to pause right now, and we're going to pick this up in the next few videos as we go through teams 9 through 16, and then 17 to 24, and then hopefully I'll be able to completely show you everybody at 40202. Once that is done, then we're going to put the this off-season in hiatus, as we are going to move into the Summer League in 1973 and 1976. All the draft for this this fall league that you're seeing here, we're not going to have the draft results posted until the fall of 2025, probably in November of 2025. But at least you get to see the skeleton, you get to see the bones, you get to see how it's put together. Some people have asked, how did you get this started, and how do you do this, and how's this work? And so I've been trying to kind of flesh it out for you here. At least, you can focus on how I'm thinking about organization and balancing Major League Baseball history with a preference to distribute the talent in my competitive 32-team league. So with that, we're going to pause it tonight. Thanks for checking this out, folks, and we'll see you next time.